this why you say that the goal of creating a secular state in Afghanistan and Iraq is unattainable?
Yes, it really has nothing to do with the capability of Muslims as people. All people are capable of all things, I think. But we decided to create a secular democracy in Afghanistan and Iraq where there is no history at all of a separation of church and state. Indeed, most Muslims regard the idea as absurd. How can there be a separation between those things? But I think, again, as in our view of the Pakistanis, so much of the trouble is on our own side. We are, in America at least, an extraordinarily ahistorical people. We don't understand where we came from, and so without that grounding, we expect to be able to put what our experience on a CD-ROM and give it to Mr. Karzai and say, here, you have 6 months or 18 months or 6 years to do this. Well, we in America, and by extension from Britain, Australia, Canada, the United States, we've been at this democracy business for 800 years, since Runnymede in 1215. How in the world can any well-educated, rational person expect that to be transferred and take root in 15 minutes in a conservative, Islamic, tribal country? It's a madness. And it's our lack of understanding both of foreigners, but where we came from ourselves.
Do you think that perhaps it's the combination of religion and state that will mean they may never achieve democracy in these countries?
I think it's possible that that they will achieve a kind of representative government, but it's very unlikely to look like ours. In the book I wrote about Osama bin Laden, part of a chapter was devoted to what he and Zawahiri and his lieutenants thought about how people should be able to express their faith in terms of how they're led politically. And they were very clear that the people had a voice in electing a leader. Once he was elected, he would remain the leader unless he deviated from Islamic law, and then it was the people's responsibility to overthrow him. So there was a much more representative element to bin Laden that there ever was to Hosni Mubarak, for example. I think the real question, though, is will a system develop in the Muslim world that's acceptable to people like David Cameron and Barack Obama and any Republican leader you can put your hand on? We're afraid of anything that has the word Islamic in it. And to expect somehow we're going to have a government emerge in Egypt that's not heavily influenced by Islam is silly. You know, the polls in the Muslim world, even for women, show that they're not interested in being treated as women are treated in the United States. Where else would they turn, I think, in a time of revolution and anxiety, but to their faith, rather than to an alien ideology like secular democracy? And we also face, you know, our foreign policy, Western foreign policy in the Middle East for 40 years has been based on the maintenance of tyranny. I think that was bad from the start, but nonetheless, that was our strategy, and it's now falling apart. But the result of our support for tyranny was the development of a situation in almost every country where there are only two organizations capable of governing. One is the tyranny. The other one is the Islamic resistance. So the question really is, when they find out that you're not going to have a government in Egypt that looks like the government in Florida, for example, are you going to be happy with it, or are you going to intervene to try to tear it down until you get something that you like? My own guess is the current administration won't like anything that comes about in Libya, in Tunisia, in Egypt.